Thank you. And hello, everybody. Welcome to our afternoon presentation here. Everybody back from lunch? Very good. We are going to talk about filmmaking in hostile underwater environments. So don't confuse that with like the Strait of Hormuz or something. We're going to be talking about cave diving, decompression diving, and filmmaking. So a little bit maybe about myself. I am indeed an underwater filmmaker. You might know me from the DiveSAGA YouTube channel. And I teach scuba instructors and tech instructors, and all those worlds collide on the DiveSAGA channel. When I mean hostile underwater environments, I of course mean, for instance, caves, wrecks, under decompression, any place where direct vertical access to the surface is not possible. Yeah. Hello, welcome. Take a seat. Take a seat. So that's what we're going to be talking about. Specifically, I would like to talk about storytelling and how to craft a story, task loading, how to deal with time constraints, sacrificing money shots, going with the flow, stress feeds creativity, and a little bit about the ethical obligations that come with doing these things. So let's start with storytelling. I think that's probably the most important thing. If you do not have a story, you really have nothing. It's, in my opinion, even better to shoot really crappy footage to support a good story than to shoot amazing imagery when you have nothing to talk about. I have a little bit of footage on the screen here. I just did a mini-series in Malta for the government of Malta specifically. They have about 100 really cool wrecks, but you still have to select that somehow, right? Like which a wreck is at the end of the day just a piece of scrap metal. So here on screen specifically is one of my favorite wrecks there. It's the Schnellboot S31. It's a German fast boat, and during the Second World War, it was laying mines, and then it basically ran over one of its own mines and sank with 2 active torpedoes still on board. And so it's a 68-meter dive, so it's relatively challenging. It's a trimix dive, a decompression dive. But the cool thing about it is that in these tubes, in these torpedo tubes, you can still see torpedoes that they're obviously not been removed. They're right there, and they're still absolutely active. Now, there's a cool story, in my opinion. But when you shoot in these challenging environments, there is quite a bit of task loading, and it's relatively tricky when you're diving already. Who handles a camera regularly on their scuba dives? Yeah, so you know that, yeah, okay, you got to keep your mind on the diving. You're an underwater photographer. You handle a camera on your scuba dives. So you know you got to keep your mind on the dive and on the camera. But now knowing that you can't even get to the surface easily, that becomes a lot more complicated. By the way, this is some footage that I took literally last week in the Alawi in Muna in Indonesia. So it's a pretty sweet cave, but it is a cave dive. That means overhead, can't just go up. It's also a scooter dive, so we're able to get ourselves pretty far into trouble. And it was also a little bit of a decompression dive. And then we have a bunch of cameras on us. So when you start adding all those things together, you can maybe start imagining that, yes, I am a cave diver. Yes, I am a scooter diver. Yes, I am an underwater videographer. But 1 + 1 does not equal 2. Because the moment you start splitting your attention, now you have half your attention on the dive, maybe half your attention on the cave line. That's enough, right? And half your attention on the camera. No. You literally have to add all those things together and do them all 100% all the time. Or of course, you're going to hurt yourself. Not only that, but that also usually involves something of a ticking clock. Because if you're in a cave, you probably have limited gas supply. If you're on a decompression dive, you probably have limited gas supply and you have limited decompression time, because you probably only have so much gas to get yourself through the decompression phase of the dive. So I liken this a little bit to, like, let's say when you work on a real movie set, there is usually the producer in the back who's watching the clock. And yeah, you also have to work your way through a shot list. You also have a little bit of time pressure. but the punishment for overshooting your schedule is not death, I think, on most film sets. In this case, it kind of is, right? If you focus completely and only on the filmmaking and you forget a little bit about that ticking clock, you could get into some serious trouble. That means you have to prioritize. So here's an example. This is the SS Polynesian, that's again in Malta. It's again a 68-meter deep dive, so it's a trimix dive. It's on open circuit, so you have limited gas supply, about 25 minutes of bottom time, and in those 25 minutes, you have to do everything that needs to be done. In this case, spoiler alert, we actually didn't get everything done, so you have to start thinking, okay, what are the best bits here? In this case, it's the stern, has a massive gun on it. Pretty cool, in my opinion. So that's the part we focused on. But again, you have to get the job done in the limited amount of time that you have logistically. Otherwise, you may be in serious trouble. Organizing a shoot in a challenging environment also means you usually have to do some pre-planning. Ideally, you know the dive site. Ideally, you know where you're going to dive. You can bring in a team, you can stage some shots, but sometimes that's just not possible. Here is one of my favorite dives of all time still. I actually talk about that dive a lot. It's in Mexico and it's a massive underwater chamber, but it's about an hour cave dive to get to that chamber and then an hour cave dive back. So all in all, it's like a 2.5-hour dive. And we only had one shot to film the whole thing. We only had one dive to film the whole thing. But if you have to go 2.5 hours, there is no time to stage anything. There is no time to plan everything. There is no time. I didn't even know what it looked like. So then you have to strategize differently. Basically, in this case, super simplified dive plan. Number one has a video light with a massive diffuser. I'm number two with a camera and I follow. And we just see what happens. But that brings us back to that task loading, because you have to see what happens while you have to execute a good dive. So it's, it's really one of my favorite places on the planet. It's 60 meters deep and 100 meters across, this massive black void. But it's honestly my least favorite way of working, because you're just for 2.5 hours diving through a screen like that, and everything around you kind of doesn't exist. That's a great way to get into trouble. I think it actually worked out relatively okay. Usually when I sort of end a dive like that, I remember nothing. That's just because you're so focused in the moment doing it that you simply don't have enough processing power your memory isn't working. You're just living in the moment and trying to shoot in the moment. Usually I get to the car and I need to immediately afterwards review the footage, because I have no recollection of what we've done. That's not my preferred way of working. As I said, it's super chaotic, but it is sometimes the only way to do it, especially when you try to shoot in places that people don't get to very often. My more preferred way of working is the one where we get to stage what I call money shots. So when we have a chance to dive multiple times on the same location, when there is a lot of information about that place, we can actually we can put a team together, we can stage things, we can even stage lights, very beautiful. So it's a very well-known cave in France. I think it's well-known, it's called Marchepied. And the only tricky thing about Marchepied is that when you start the dive, you have about this much clearance to get to the actual cave. So the dive starts with like a 5-minute restriction that is this big, and you just have to scrape yourself through that. But that still means that you're planning to set up shots, you're planning to execute a whole plan after 5 minutes of crawling through a letterbox, essentially. So again, your whole filmmaking process takes place on the other side of that rabbit hole. So what that means is, even when you have time to plan, and even when you have time to schedule everything, you have to be willing to sacrifice all of that for your own safety. If you are, again, you are an underwater photographer, you dabble underwater filmmaking, so you often have these like preconceived ideas of what you want to get, and it can be incredibly, you can get a bit obsessive about that. Like you have an idea of what you want to shoot, and suddenly that becomes your main mission for that dive. But it's not, right? What is the number one mission of any dive? Is to come back, it's survival. So you have to be willing to sacrifice everything. Now in this case, for instance, that was not me alone, that's with a few people, it's with a team. There are lights staged in the back, for instance, there's some lights staged in the front. So you get to this spot, you want to get your shot that you have in mind, but you have to be willing to look on your dive computer, look at your gas supply and say, oh, we're here, but we don't have time anymore. We have to turn around. That's probably the number one way that you could kill yourself in these types of situations, is by obsessing over the shot and not call it in time. So you have to be willing to get within a hair of total mission success and call it. And then there is going with the flow, because sometimes you make all your best plans, you have amazing shot list in mind, you know exactly what you're going to do, and then the dive kind of starts dictating itself. What did I say earlier? The story always comes first. The story is the most important thing. If you do not have a story, you have nothing. Well, this is an example. Last year in Boyai Mines in Thailand, you were there 2 weeks ago, right? Was it still there? Like decompression habitat. So we were installing a decompression habitat. That was kind of the focus of our shoot. We were going to install this thing so that divers could decompress, etc. And then suddenly a story started developing itself that we absolutely could not have predicted. And what is, of course, the goal of any good filmmaker, any good documentary maker? You feel, you listen, you look for where the story takes you. You have to keep yourself safe, but you want to follow the story. And I'll maybe play a little clip, because it's kind of one of my most imprinted memories that I'll play right here.
As we head out of the cloud of disturbed sediment and into clearer waters, I hear a loud rumbling noise, a bit like the bubbles gushing against the ceiling, but much louder and with much stronger vibrations. For a moment, I wonder if our efforts had perhaps upset the structural integrity of the mine, but I know that's not likely. As we surface, the decompression team, which was just about to get ready to start their push dives, urges us to exit the water rapidly and follow them into the vehicles to the other mine shaft we mapped yesterday. A third team that was getting ready to enter the water for a training dive encountered an unusual phenomenon. The water in these mine shafts is supposed to be stagnant, but right now it is acting strange. The water inside these mines is not supposed to move like this. Despite the decades of knowledge present in the team, the cause is anyone's guess.
But if there's something seismic going on, or whatever, that caused the whole thing, might be a bit more fragile than we were thinking.
In the lower levels, when we go to the upper levels, the gas was going through the floors.
Yeah, no,
From everywhere.
limestone. But if it collapses underwater, it shouldn't make that kind of wave, does it?
Like that, it could.
I don't know if anybody know what had happened. Anybody saw the episode? Maybe, yeah. Earthquake, right? So literally while we were diving, there was a 7.7, I think, Richter scale earthquake right there in the region while we were underwater. But the thing is, I didn't know that. Nobody really knew. Because you could see in the video, even people with decades of experience were like, oh, maybe it's a collapse. Maybe. So again, you want to be an underwater filmmaker. You want to be a documentary maker. You want to let the story guide you. And that is very intoxicating, because what should be, again, your number one priority is getting home at the end of the day. And really, you have no business being in man-made underground mines while the earth is literally shaking, right? So it's a thin line to walk sometimes between following your story and still keeping yourself safe. Now, sometimes you have massive constraints. And this is, again, is sort of one of my favorite shots. This is again in a French cave, Gouffre de Cabouille, and it was a total 4-kilometer scooter dive. So it's I think also 2.5 hour dive maybe, in and out on a scooter. But the problem is, as I said earlier, sometimes you can sort of stop and stage, but that was not possible in this case. If you want to cover 2 kilometers in, 2 kilometers out, you have no time to stop, set up some lights, turn around, swim past them. You have to go, go, go. In this case, with a scooter. So that's a serious limitation. We can't make any nice plans. We can't paint any nice pictures. What do we do? In this case, the solution was kind of to put a long selfie stick on the scooter with a 360 camera. So a camera that basically films all the way around, front, behind. I think you guys know those. Then there's a diver in front on a scooter with lights, I think 30,000 lumens with diffusers just to light up the cave. Then there's myself. There's actually light shining directly in my face. So I don't see where I'm going at all for 2 hours straight. But yeah, you have to light your subject, which in this case is me. And then there's a third diver, bless her, she's behind me, also with a massive video light, just to create backlight the whole time, because again, otherwise I would not be separated from the background. So she had the thankless task to just be the butt light, as we call it. And so that's 2.5 hours of that. Now you just see a single vantage point where the camera is pointed towards me, but you can point that camera in post-production anywhere. You can point it in front, below, up. You can even make it move. And I think it's actually a cool shot. It's something that we maybe wouldn't have had if we had the luxury and the time to stop and stage. So sometimes those limitations actually create a lot of cool new results. Cool in my opinion. But lastly, there is also the ethical obligation. When you go into these environments, when you go in places that you maybe shouldn't be or that are very hard to visit, you have to also think about what your obligations are. This is a weird photo, I know, is because it's the only photo I have of this event. Last December, I got permits to shoot in the caves of Mallorca. Mallorca is an island in Spain. They have beautiful Mexican cenote-style caves, absolutely gorgeous, but nobody is allowed to dive there unless you have a very specific government permit. And it took over a year, and lobbying and meeting people, negotiating to get those permits, because I would never go there and just trespass. That's not what any of this is about, to be clear. Finally got the permits, shot 3 episodes, over an hour of amazing finished footage. A lot of people were interested because it's a place you normally do not get to see, because people do not get to go there and shoot video, etc. We published the first episode, and 5 days later, we got my contact in Mallorca literally got summoned to the police station, and we had to take everything down because the governing body that issues the permits didn't find that we acted within the framework that they had envisioned. And so we sort of retroactively lost the permits and had to take everything down. And so I'm not even gonna show, this is one picture I can show you because it's technically on privately owned property outside the cave. So I can kind of show that without stepping outside of the boundaries of our permits. But the reason I include it is because this has nothing to do with like urban exploration, trespassing. Whenever you do stuff like that, you still have to make sure that you work within legal frameworks. You have to make sure that what you do is legally sound. You have to display positive diving habits. I always kind of go out of my way to make sure that everybody looks good in those videos, that everybody like dive technically looks on point, and that we use that influence as a force for good. In this case, that also means complying with legal frameworks if you don't like them. So you can shoot a whole thing, spend weeks shooting something, months editing something, and then take it down, never to be seen again, except this one lousy picture, but that's for you to enjoy. So there you go. Thank you very much for entertaining my little talk about filmmaking in hostile underwater environment. Are there any questions, perhaps?